What happens when Hollywood royalty meets late-night television royalty and everything goes spectacularly wrong? You won't believe what unfolds when a routine celebrity interview transforms into one of the most explosive confrontations in late-night television history. Tonight, we're diving deep into the shocking events that left audiences stunned, social media in chaos, and one former royal storming off stage in a dramatic exit that nobody saw coming. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe what unfolds when civility crumbles and professionalism goes out the window on live television. The Ed Sullivan Theater was buzzing with its usual pre-show energy as Stephen Colbert prepared for what was supposed to be a straightforward celebrity interview. The audience had no idea they were about to witness television history in the making. As the familiar Late Show theme music filled the air, Colbert delivered his opening monologue with his signature wit, building anticipation for his guest appearance that would soon turn into a media firestorm. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Meghan Markle," Colbert announced with his characteristic enthusiasm, gesturing toward the stage entrance. The audience erupted in polite applause as Meghan emerged, wearing an elegant black dress that seemed carefully chosen to project authority and sophistication. She waved to the crowd with a practiced smile, her posture radiating the confidence of someone accustomed to public scrutiny. As she settled into the guest chair, there was an immediate shift in the atmosphere that seasoned television watchers might have recognized as the calm before the storm. Colbert, ever the professional, began with what appeared to be standard pleasantries, but keen observers noticed a subtle tension in his demeanor that suggested this wasn't going to be the typical softball celebrity interview. "Meghan, it's great to have you here," Colbert began, his tone measured but carrying an undercurrent that hinted at more serious territory ahead. "You've been quite busy lately, haven't you? Between your various projects and public appearances, it seems like you're everywhere." Meghan's smile remained fixed, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of wariness. "Thank you for having me, Stephen. Yes, I've been fortunate to have many opportunities to share important messages and connect with people around the world." The exchange seemed innocent enough, but veteran talk show viewers could sense the underlying tension building. Colbert's questions, while polite on the surface, carried a pointed edge that suggested he had done his homework and wasn't planning to stick to the usual promotional script. "Speaking of important messages," Colbert continued, leaning forward, slightly in his chair, "there's been quite a bit of discussion about your recent comments regarding privacy and media attention. Some people find it interesting that someone who regularly appears in the spotlight continues to emphasize the importance of privacy. How do you reconcile that apparent contradiction?" The question hung in the air like a challenge, and Meghan's composure shifted almost imperceptibly. Her smile became more forced, and she straightened in her chair as if preparing for battle. "I think there's a difference between choosing when to share your story and having every aspect of your life scrutinized. Without consent, Stephen." Colbert nodded slowly, but his expression suggested he wasn't satisfied with the diplomatic response. "That's fair. But wouldn't you agree that public figures, especially those who actively seek media attention, have a certain responsibility to accept both positive and negative coverage?" The temperature in the studio seemed to drop several degrees as Meghan's facade began to crack. "I think what you're implying is unfair and, frankly, quite presumptuous," she responded, her voice taking on a sharper edge that made the audience shift uncomfortably in their seats. But this was only the beginning of what would become one of the most shocking confrontations in late-night television history, and the real fireworks were just getting started. Colbert wasn't backing down, and his next question cut straight to the heart of the matter that had been simmering beneath the surface. "Let's talk about your recent Netflix projects and various business ventures. You've built quite an empire since stepping back from royal duties. Some critics argue that you've monetized your royal connections while simultaneously criticizing the institution. What's your response to those who say you can't have it both ways?" The question hit like a lightning bolt, and Meghan's carefully constructed composure began to visibly crack. Her hands gripped the armrests of her chair, and her voice rose noticeably. As she fired back, "I find it absolutely incredible that you would sit here and question my right to build a career and support my family. The audacity of suggesting that I'm somehow exploiting connections when I've been subjected to years of harassment and scrutiny is frankly offensive." The audience fell silent, sensing they were witnessing something unprecedented. Colbert, however, remained calm and pressed forward with the precision of a seasoned journalist who had clearly prepared for this moment. "I'm not questioning your right to work, Meghan. I'm asking about the apparent inconsistency between your public statements, about wanting privacy and your very public business dealings that specifically reference your royal background." "There's no inconsistency," Meghan snapped, her voice now carrying a sharp edge that cut through the studio atmosphere like a knife. "What's inconsistent is the way the media and people like you continue to twist everything I do into some kind of calculated scheme. I've been transparent about my experiences and my work." Colbert leaned back slightly, his eyebrows raised in a way that suggested he had more ammunition ready to deploy. "Transparent? That's interesting because there have been questions about some of your charitable initiatives and how funds are allocated. Would you care to address the concerns raised by investigative journalists about the Archewell Foundation's spending?" The mention of financial scrutiny seemed to hit a nerve that went deeper than anything discussed so far. Meghan's face flushed, and she shifted forward in her chair aggressively. "How dare you bring up unsubstantiated claims and present them as fact on national television? This is exactly the kind of irresponsible journalism that has made my life impossible." "I'm not presenting anything as fact," Colbert replied with measured precision. "I'm asking you to respond to publicly reported concerns. Isn't that what interviews are for? To give public figures a chance to address questions and criticism?" The tension in the studio had reached a breaking point, and viewers could sense that something explosive was about to happen. Meghan's breathing became more visible, and her voice took on a trembling quality that suggested she was barely containing her rage. "This isn't an interview, Stephen. This is an ambush. You invited me here under false pretenses to attack my character and my work." "I invited you here to have a conversation," Colbert responded, his tone remaining professional even, as the situation spiraled out of control. "If asking direct questions about public statements and public actions constitutes an ambush, then perhaps that says more about your comfort with accountability than it does about my journalism." The word accountability seemed to trigger something primal in Meghan, and what happened next would become the most talked-about moment of the entire confrontation, setting the stage for an explosion that would leave everyone in the studio completely stunned. Meghan's eyes flashed with fury as she stood up abruptly from her chair, pointing an accusatory finger directly at Colbert. "Accountability? You want to talk about accountability? Where's the accountability for the racist coverage I've endured? Where's the accountability for the lies that have been spread about me by people exactly like you?" The audience gasped audibly, and you could hear the sharp intake of breath from crew members off camera. Colbert remained seated, his expression serious but controlled as he responded, "Meghan, I think you need to be very careful about the accusations you're making right now. This is live television, and—" "Don't you dare lecture me about being careful," Meghan interrupted, her voice rising to a level that made the studio microphones crackle. "I'm tired of being careful while people like you profit from tearing me down. You sit there in your comfortable chair, making jokes and asking loaded questions, while real people suffer real consequences from this kind of character assassination." Colbert's professional mask began to slip slightly as he leaned forward, his voice taking on a firmer tone. "Character assassination? I asked you legitimate questions about public statements you've made and public actions you've taken. If that feels like an attack, maybe you should examine why accountability feels so threatening to you." The mention of accountability again sent Meghan into what could only be described as a complete meltdown. She began pacing behind her chair, gesticulating wildly as her voice reached a fever pitch. Threatening? You think I'm threatened by you? I've faced down the British tabloid press, the royal establishment, and an entire system designed to destroy me. You're nothing compared to what I've already survived. Then why are you so upset by simple questions? Colbert shot back, his own patience clearly wearing thin. If you've survived all of that, surely you can handle a basic interview about your public work and statements. Basic interview? Meghan laughed bitterly, a sound that echoed through the stunned studio. This is a hit job, and everyone watching knows it. You brought me here to humiliate me, to get your ratings boost by watching me squirm. Well, congratulations, Stephen. You've got your viral moment. The camera operators were working overtime to capture every angle of the unprecedented meltdown, while audience members sat frozen in their seats, unsure whether to applaud, boo, or simply flee. Colbert stood up now, matching Meghan's energy for the first time in the interview. You know what, Meghan? You're absolutely right about one thing. This is going to be a viral moment, but not for the reasons you think. This tantrum you're throwing right now is showing everyone exactly who you really are when you can't control the narrative. Tantrum? Meghan's voice cracked with indignation. How dare you diminish my legitimate anger as a tantrum? This is exactly the kind of gaslighting that women, especially women of color, face when they refuse to stay silent and compliant. Colbert shook his head, his expression now showing genuine disgust. Don't hide behind identity politics when you can't answer basic questions about your own behavior. Playing the victim card doesn't work when you're the one who came on this show voluntarily. The studio had become a battlefield with two powerful personalities locked in verbal combat that showed no signs of de-escalation. What started as a routine celebrity interview had transformed into something far more raw and revealing, and the worst was yet to come as both participants prepared to cross lines that couldn't be uncrossed. The breaking point came when Colbert delivered what would become the most quoted line of the entire confrontation. You know what your real problem is, Meghan? You can't stand that you're not the most important person in every room anymore. You left the royal family thinking you'd become bigger than them, and instead you've become a cautionary tale about what happens when entitlement meets reality. The words hit Meghan like a physical blow, and for a moment she stood completely still, her face cycling through expressions of shock, rage, and something that looked dangerously close to pure hatred. When she finally spoke, her voice was low and venomous, carrying a threat that made everyone in the studio uncomfortable. You have absolutely no idea what you're talking about, and you have no right to speak about my family or my choices. But, since you want to go there, let's talk about reality, Stephen. Let's talk about a middle-aged comedian who thinks he's some kind of political commentator, desperately clinging to relevance by attacking people who are actually trying to make a difference in the world. Colbert's face darkened as Meghan continued her assault. You sit behind this desk every night making jokes about people's pain, profiting from division and controversy. At least I'm trying to use my platform for something positive. What do you do besides tear people down for entertainment? I hold public figures accountable, Colbert fired back, his voice now matching her intensity. Something that clearly terrifies you because you've never had to face real consequences for your actions. You've floated through life on privilege and victimhood, and now when someone asks you direct questions, you fall apart. The audience was completely silent now, sensing they were witnessing something that had crossed far beyond entertainment into genuinely uncomfortable territory. Meghan moved closer to Colbert's desk, her body language becoming increasingly aggressive. Privilege? Victimhood? She laughed harshly. Says the man who built his career on nepotism and industry connections. At least my struggles were real. You've manufactured your entire persona around pretending to be some kind of everyman while living in your Manhattan bubble. My struggles? Colbert stood up again, his professional composure finally cracking completely. Lady, you married into one of the wealthiest families on earth, lived in palaces, and then cashed out with $100 million deals. Don't lecture me about struggle when your biggest hardship was deciding which mansion to buy with your Netflix money. The exchange had devolved into something ugly and personal, with both participants now attacking each other with a viciousness that shocked even seasoned television professionals watching from the wings. Production assistants were frantically signaling to the control room, unsure whether to cut to commercial or let the carnage continue. Meghan slammed her hand on Colbert's desk, causing his coffee mug to rattle and splash. "You are a pathetic, bitter man who gets his kicks from bullying women. This entire interview was designed to humiliate me, and everyone watching can see exactly what kind of person you really are." "The only person being humiliated here is you," Colbert shot back, without hesitation. "And you're doing it to yourself with this unhinged performance. I asked you reasonable questions, and you've responded like someone who's completely lost touch with reality." The confrontation had reached a fever pitch that seemed impossible to sustain, but neither participant showed any signs of backing down. The air crackled with tension as they stared each other down across the desk, and viewers could sense that something irreversible was about to happen that would end this explosive encounter once and for all. The final explosion came when Colbert delivered what would become the knockout punch of the entire confrontation. "You want to know what this is really about, Meghan? It's about someone who thought they could use their celebrity status to avoid tough questions forever. Well, welcome to the real world, where actions have consequences and public figures get held accountable for their words." Meghan's face contorted with rage as she stepped back from the desk, her voice reaching a shrieking pitch that made the studio microphones strain. "I'm done with this circus. I'm done with being attacked by mediocre men who think they can make their careers by tearing down successful women. This interview is over." She began yanking off her wireless microphone pack, fumbling with the battery, pack clipped to her dress as her hands shook with fury. "You can take your pathetic show and your desperate attempts at relevance and shove them where the sun doesn't shine, Stephen. I hope you're proud of yourself for this disgusting display." Colbert watched her meltdown with a mixture of satisfaction and disbelief. "Ladies and gentlemen, you're witnessing what happens when someone who's never been told no finally faces reality. This is what accountability looks like when you're not surrounded by yes-men and palace staff." "Accountability?" Meghan threw her microphone onto the floor, where it landed with a sharp crack that echoed through the studio. "This isn't accountability. This is character assassination by a washed-up comedian who peaked 20 years ago. You're nothing but a bitter, pathetic man who gets his kicks from bullying women on national television." The studio audience sat in stunned silence as Meghan gathered her purse and coat, her movements sharp and aggressive. Security personnel had quietly moved closer to the stage area, unsure whether their intervention would be needed. The confrontation had crossed every line of professional decorum, leaving everyone uncertain about what might happen next. "I don't need to sit here and be insulted by someone whose greatest achievement is reading jokes off a teleprompter," Meghan continued, her voice carrying across the studio as she prepared to leave. "Your viewers deserve better than this garbage, and I deserve better than to be ambushed by a third-rate host desperate for ratings." Colbert stood behind his desk, his expression a mixture of triumph and disgust. "The only person who ambushed anyone here is you, Meghan. You ambushed yourself with your own behavior. Every question I asked was fair, every topic was relevant, and your response was to throw a tantrum worthy of a spoiled child." "Go to hell, Stephen!" Meghan snarled as she stormed toward the stage exit, her heels clicking aggressively against the studio floor. "And when your ratings tank because people see what kind of person you really are, remember this moment. Remember that you chose to be a bully instead of a professional." She paused at the edge of the stage, turning back for one final devastating blow. "Oh, and Stephen, when you're lying awake tonight wondering why your career is circling the drain, remember that you had the chance to conduct a respectful interview with someone who's actually making a difference in the world. And instead, you chose to be a petty, vindictive little man." Congratulations on showing everyone exactly who you really are. With that, Meghan Markle stormed off the Late Show stage, leaving behind a stunned studio audience and a confrontation that would dominate headlines for weeks to come. The dramatic exit marked the end of one of the most explosive celebrity interviews in television history, sparking widespread debate about professionalism, accountability, and the limits of public discourse. Social media exploded with reactions, with many viewers expressing shock at Meghan's behavior and praising Colbert for asking tough questions that other interviewers had avoided. The incident became a defining moment that highlighted the importance of journalistic integrity and the consequences of losing control on live television.